He was considered unadoptable because he showed aggression towards some government employees, and I have to say I'm with him there.
I was gonna be like, you got the right horse. I don't know what the problem is. I think you got the
um,
perfect horse.
I agree. Like, we have the same philosophy, dude. You want to come
Is his
home?
name Waco or something?
His
Ruby
name is
Ridge, maybe?
Cortez.
Oh, okay. This is the Farm Hop Life podcast. I'm Matt DeRozier. Today, my guest is Lauren on Twitter at Lauren in the Wild. She has a farmstead in Northwest Montana. How's it going, Lauren?
Going well. How are you doing, Matt?
Doing good, thank you. This has been a long time. I mean, 2 months almost in the making. You're busy. You're a very busy person, getting things done. So I want to introduce you. Like normally, I have a couple things to say on who the person is, but you've had such a crazy life. I can't like just put it down in like 2 sentences on who you are as a person. So you sent over some pictures for me and a couple that you've posted on Twitter as well. Thank you for that. So if you want, let's go right into some of these pictures that you sent.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good.
How do I maximize this? I don't know. Close enough. You can see all my tabs open. I don't really give a crap. Okay, so what are we what are we looking at here?
So I grew up on a large working cattle ranch in the mountains in Colorado. This was at about 10,000 feet altitude, a little bit lower. We ran registered Hereford cattle, and we had a grass-fed, grass-finished beef operation before it was the cool thing to do. So this would have been back in the 80s and into the early 90s. We direct marketed beef to a pretty solid customer base down in Denver. So this picture was my father. Looks like he's trying to rope some youngins to do some work with them. We ran anywhere from 500 to 1,500 head a year. Uh,
Dang.
as you can see, this is a beautiful little lush valley, but it didn't start out that way. This was my crucible into regenerative agricultural practices. When we started on this ranch, it was very degraded. It had been overgrazed for probably decades. It was basically bedrock in most places in that valley bottom with a creek running through it. Over the course of about 20 years of careful grazing management, we built up almost a foot of blacktop soil and turned it into this kind of green oasis. So that taught me a lot about sustainable ag, about regenerative ag, about grazing management that I've carried into what we're doing now. And I'm sure we'll get into that later.
Is that now forgive, I'm from the city, so I'm kind of dumb. Was that kind of like revolutionary for its time being like working cattle that way instead of the conventional way?
It was. My father is very much a revolutionary. He has never done anything the normal way. So when he took this project on, he did a ton of research. He basically decided that he wasn't going to listen to any of the old timers, any of the ranchers around us that were telling him how to do things. He was pretty green when he took this on.
Hmm.
Uh, Actually, he had never handled cattle before. So he dove in with
Wow.
both feet.
I guess, and
Um,
then some.
and then some. Took on this 24/7 job for 25 years and just rocked it. He read some texts. There was a French cattle grazier. I wish I could remember his name. I'm sure the regenerative ag folks would be able to rattle it off, but he was introducing some of these concepts pretty early on. My dad got a hold of that book and just ran with it. And of course, this was, I don't know if you're familiar with Alan Savory.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, so this was the progenitor to Alan Savory's work and the inspiration for a
Wow.
lot of Savory's work. And then Savory came along later, and I believe that was also an influence. But mostly it was trial and error and just working with the system, working with the cattle, working with the land, and finding out what worked, and seeing that feedback happening really quickly as the land started to heal.
That's super awesome. Do you want me to go to the next picture here?
Sure, sure.
I just opened them in the order you sent them to me. So
Okay, so this was the same property. This was a part of the property that wasn't very managed. We kind of would move the cattle through that to other pastures. So you can kind of see this is what the property looked like when we started out.
okay, yeah, it's definitely different. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Do your parents still own that space, that place there?
They don't, they never did. This
Oh,
was,
okay.
yeah, this was 10,000 acres that was owned by a very wealthy family. I think mostly they used it as a tax write-off.
Hmm.
So this was, my dad walked into the management position on this place, and basically was given free reign to do with it as he pleased, which was really a special situation, including being
Yeah,
given the opportunity to raise cattle our own way and then sell them and profit from them. So it was kind of a cool deal.
that's that's pretty sweet. Yeah, because it'd be hard to like do it this way with someone's like trying to micromanage who has no idea how to raise cattle. Like, no, you got to do it just like everybody else.
Right.
What is this?
So it's a bit of a leap. Um,
Oh,
so, so this was the other strange part of my upbringing. I was somehow lucky enough to be born into a family that was crazy about doing living history and historical reenactment. Um, so this is my dad in armor. He made all of the armor. He's an incredible blacksmith and armorer.
what?
I know. Um, and so I tell people about my childhood, and people tell me I should write a book, but I don't know if it would be believed, to be honest. Um, so when we weren't ranching, which of course is a full-time job, we were diving into all these historical reenactment events and living history events. So what that means is we would completely immerse ourselves in a particular period of time, live it as people would have lived in that time period, including the clothes, the technology, the tools, and the literature, the music. And we would do this for fairly extended periods of time just to really get a grasp of what it was like to live in that time period. So we spent a better part of a decade really delving into medieval Europe, and this was a part of that.
Hmm.
My father and I spent a lot of time on the international live action jousting circuit, which, is the sport where armored knights try to knock each other off horses. It's still a thing that is done. There are these big international competitions where people come from all over the world to compete in this sport. So we judged events, we traveled to these events, and my father jousted a bit, although he started to get to the point where flying off a horse wasn't necessarily what he wanted to do. So we didn't do that for terribly long. But we
Sure.
also did a lot of archery, traditional weapons work. He hunted elk with that bow that you see there.
No way. I get.
That was he did.
Why am I surprised? It's just that's
Yep.
wild.
He put a bull elk on the table with that very bow.
Wow.
So it was really kind of a special thing. And I think you have some photos that I also sent in this batch of different eras that we kind of explored as a family. Yep. So still a medieval era. Um, his suit of armor he made with this very small blacksmith shop he had, an armoring shop. Everything you can see in that photo, actually, he made his sword, he made his armor, he even made the saddle he's riding. I think that's his medieval saddle. And we would, we set
Jeez.
up a course and we'd ride our horses and we'd do work with swords. We'd chop melons and squash and do horseback sword work and horseback archery and things like that.
That's so wild. Can you still do it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, on our current property, we're going to set up a horseback archery course because that's something I really enjoy.
You know what? You could honestly be on like Airbnb experiences or whatever they call it and like make that a thing. Like $500 a person, like for an hour. Like here's the waiver, can't sue us ever.
That's right. That would be
So
crazy fun, actually.
people would absolutely pay for that type of thing. To like just like weird brain thing. I was watching like this History Channel thing a while ago, and like the Mongolians or whatever, their saddles were high in the front and the back, so they could turn like and still like shoot their arrows while riding. It like made it easier or whatever. I was like, that's pretty smart.
Yep, and they had these little short bows that were designed for horseback work, so they didn't poke their horses.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. See, I don't even need to tell you. Just whoever's listening that didn't know that. You already know. You're like like a professor historian without the degree. You lived it.
Yep. So this was another of the history eras we did. So this would be like 1880s Victorian era.
Sure.
And we got stuck in this era for quite a while. It was pretty cool. So that's my father in the middle. That's me in the red dress. We would do Victorian fashion shows, a lot of Victorian costume design. All of the dresses you see in this photo and the costuming were made within our family. We didn't buy any of it. And we would go to these events where people would either hire us or, we would go to kind of exhibit the clothing of the period and some of the technology of the period.
That's so crazy. Is this still while you're living in Colorado?
Yeah, this was in Colorado, and I believe this photo would have been Silverton, which is kind of famous for Victorian
Okay.
things. They have
I
an
didn't
old
know if that was
steam engine.
common. Okay.
Yeah, it is. It's a bit of a cultural thing in that particular community. They have an old steam engine train that they run, and you can go ride that train through the mountains. It's kind of a cool
what?
thing. Yeah,
Still?
still. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Road trip. All right. That's cool.
All right, so the fur trade era. This was the other historical living history era that we did a lot of. That's my dad in the front with his black powder rifle.
Let me guess. He made that.
He made some parts of that. Later, he actually did forge a Sharp's buffalo rifle by hand.
What?
Did the whole thing by hand. That's something that someday I will have in my collection.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and he hunted with his black powder rifle. He was never one of those modern firearms guys. It was always the primitive technology. And it put food on our table, and I think that was a big part of the point was keeping those skills alive so that we never became too dependent on modern technology in our family. I think my dad, a lot of this was just enjoying the history and learning about the history and really experiencing it on a visceral level. But it was also very practical. Let's keep these skills going. Let's make sure that we're never becoming too dependent. Let's play with some of these tools that really are dying art people don't use anymore.
Oh yeah.
And some of them honestly are a lot better than the modern options that we have, arguably.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like it's crazy how hard people had to work back then for their food. Like every day, not just once a month or once a week, every day. They had to just go out there and just grind as hard as they can, otherwise they're going to starve to death. Like,
Mhm.
like, putting on a couple miles or whatever, going out hunting or whatever, and heading back to the truck and heading home. Like, that wasn't an option.
No, not at all. It was a grind, and people in that era were extraordinarily tough. I mean, we don't have
Oh
any
yeah.
idea today how easy we have it.
Like, oh, my hands are a little cold. I'm gonna head back.
Yeah. Yeah, so this was kind of a fun part of our lives. We had this period authentic camp setup. This would have been 1880s kind of settler era. So we had our wall tent, and we had this chuck wagon that we lovingly restored to
Nice.
perfect historical accurate standards. And we'd go set up this camp. We'd head off into the mountains with this chuck wagon. It had its full kitchen box and everything. And we'd pick a beautiful meadow, and we'd set up a camp and cook our food over the fire, spend several days there. Of course, fires were built with flint and steel, no matches or lighters allowed. Really just living it and getting our feet really deep into that era. And people loved this. We would always have 40 or 50 people show up to come do this with us. They
Wow, that's a
Yeah.
lot.
Oh yeah, they'd come out, they'd bring their kids, we'd make sourdough biscuits and cook them over the fire, and elk stew, and everybody would drink beer and play bluegrass music, and it always turned into a big multi-day party. People just absolutely loved it. I think people in general, especially today, and this was back in the 90s, but especially today, people really crave a taste of authenticity, because we're really lacking that in our culture in so many ways. So and even back then, it was such a special thing for people. A lot of these people were working city jobs in Denver, living in a suburban house, and they'd come out and do this with us, and just kind of feel really deeply human in a way that they didn't get to otherwise.
Sure. If you guys had the chuck wagon, what did the suburbanites use?
Oh, they'd bring their modern tents out, and
Okay.
some would sleep in their trucks, and
Okay. Okay. This is like another thing with the popularity of 1883. People would this would be like another Airbnb experience. You could sell them.
yeah, no kidding. Yeah, hadn't even considered it, but and this was also normal to me. So looking back on it now, it's like that was kind of a strange childhood. Um Unique for sure, but
Absolutely. Well, when
at
you're the daughter of like a demigod, I mean,
Renaissance man for sure.
absolutely. Both like almost literally and figuratively.
Mhm.
Here we go. Oh, I'm a little too far zoomed in. There we go.
So this is me at about 20. I was about 20 years old here, learning to farm with horses. And this was one of my first times putting a horse in harness and learning how to drive.
Nice. Do you still use draft horses or
I don't currently have a team, but it is on my list. I would love to
okay?
get some haying equipment and do some haying with a team, because it's a wonderful way to do it.
Is it hard to find haying equipment to do it the old way?
Not at all. Actually, John Deere has a modern line of horse-drawn haying equipment that they sell.
Really?
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah. Working with horses and mules in a farm setting is still quite popular. So there are whole lines of equipment being made, and then of course there are people that specialize in restoring the old tools too. So there's a lot of it on
Sure.
the market. It's easy to get, and good horses are easy to get too. So it's really a nice alternative to diesel-based farming. And I think as fuel gets more expensive, more people will be leaning on this. So
Might have to. Absolutely. Can't, I mean, maybe someone will like take their old school haying equipment and put it behind their Prius and try to do it. I don't know.
That's funny.
Is this the trapper phase?
This was, yeah, and I think this one got somewhat popular on Twitter for a while.
Yes, it did. That's what this was. One of the things that I was like, who is this? Who is this person?
Yeah, so this is my mom and dad. They lived in a teepee for several years at like 10,000 feet in the mountains through winters and everything, using horse and donkey as transportation, completely off the grid. I mean, completely. They didn't own a car. They didn't have running water. They didn't have electricity. They literally lived like it was 1840, rode their horses into town when they needed a few basic supplies, but otherwise lived off the land, and they did really well. They had an incredible quality of life. There were some hungry times for sure.
Sure.
But, it was an experience that both of them talk about very fondly. And they were out there for, like I said, several years doing this and just thriving.
Crazy. So what year did you say this was or would have been?
This would have been right around like 80, I think between 89, 91, somewhere in that span.
Were you born then?
I wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah. So this was a little bit before I was born. And in fact, they stopped living that way because they had a child, which
Oh, was it your
is
fault?
It was my fault. It's a little unfortunate.
Oh.
I think I would have loved to have been like that, but yeah, so this is our current property here in northern Montana.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm assuming because of the anonymity, you're like, that's as close as we're gonna go.
Yeah, it is.
That's fair. Absolutely fair.
I think people who know Montana can probably identify it from photos, but
I don't know. I've only been up that way a handful of times, so maybe not. Maybe I'm not sure. But yeah, we'll just reverse image search it and we'll find you.
That's right. So this is one of the first days we had our herd of cattle on the property. We bought this property a couple of years ago, but we've only been living on it for about 6 months, and we're very much in the early stages of setting up our regenerative ag systems here. Of course, the cows are an integral part of that. You can't really have regenerative ag without the grazers. So this was, I think, the first or second day that we brought the cows here. It was a very special day for us.
That's awesome. That reminds me, I'm going to make a note somewhere. I don't know where, since I'm sharing my screen. It'd break the flow. But we almost need to talk about the documentary Cowspiracy. Let's put a pin in that. If you've seen it. Have you seen it?
I have not seen it.
Okay.
I've had a couple of...
Your blood would boil, probably.
I had a couple ex-vegan friends tell me about it, but...
Okay, so you get the gist of it. Okay.
Yeah. This is a couple of our milk cows. This is Amazon and Flossie.
Why Flossie?
I did not name her. She came with that name. I'm not sure.
Okay. I guess I'm thinking too, like, rationally, like sometimes names are just a name and doesn't have to mean anything.
Yeah, these cows came out of a very large herd of brown Swiss dairy cows, and I think they just kind of got assigned some random names when they were born without a whole lot of meaning. So,
Although the name Amazon makes me think, like, what if you could actually buy a milk cow from Amazon? Like, wouldn't that be something?
Shipping might be a problem.
2-day free shipping if you're a Prime member. Nice. That's gorgeous.
Mm. This was about a month ago, our first significant snow here. And this cow is very special to me. Um, she is a Normandy cow, and the Normandy cows are going to form the nucleus of our dairy program here.
Oh.
They are a French breed, obviously, if you if you know about the Normandy region. Um, they were imported into this country as a beef and dairy breed, so they're dual purpose,
Hmm.
and they have an extraordinary ability to produce really well on nothing but grass. I don't know if you're very familiar with dairy cows, but most dairy cows in America are very grain dependent. So these cows are going to be our grass-based dairy pioneers, we could say. The brown Swiss cows that we have, like you saw in the last photo, wonderful cows. I really love having them on the milk line, but I mean, they take 10 to 15 pounds of grain a day to keep their production going, which to me is um, it's a significant dependency that I would like to not have for our farm. So these Normandy cows are renowned for their ability to produce incredible quality and quantity of milk without the grain inputs, just on grass. So we're really leaning into these cows. They're hard to find. They're still pretty rare in this country. There are some breeders starting to pop up, but this is the seed stock for our breeding program here for these.
Okay. Are you so you're trying to breed them on your property, or you're just bringing in like artificial insemination type?
Yeah, so we brought this cow in and a heifer, and they will both be AI'd. We're going to import some Normandy semen from France and get a herd started. We're also looking at doing some embryo transfer in the future, and also crossing the brown Swiss on some Normandy bulls to try to bring some of the hybrid vigor
Okay.
and reduce their dependency on grain and see how that goes.
That'll be interesting. That'll be an interesting cross. Okay, so this is the other thing that you sent me today, and I was like, here's another like, what? How do I introduce this person?
So this was a special period in my life. This was when I was about 24, 23, 24. I was given an opportunity to go live on the Blackfoot reservation here in Montana, to volunteer for a program it was an equine based program where we had a herd of old Blackfoot native horses that this man that had this property was working to preserve. They were called buffalo runners. They were the horses that the Blackfoot used to hunt buffalo on the
Wow.
plains. He had some original bloodlines. He was breeding and preserving them. And he invited me to come and stay on the property and to help out with this program. Big part of what he was doing was bringing the horses and at-risk youth together, and using the horses as kind of a conduit for the culture to bring kids back into the traditional Blackfoot ways. So it was a pretty amazing thing he was doing. We had tribal elders that would come and teach the Blackfoot language. We would teach the traditional skills like hide tanning, butchering, hunting, working with horses, of course, riding. And my part of this was the horsemanship aspect. So
Hmm.
I was given this teepee by the tribe to live in while I was there. It was called Ponakomita Otan, which was the horse lodge. And I would work with the horses and work with the kids, teach the kids how to ride, teach the kids horsemanship, and train horses to be safe for the kids to work with. It was about 16 hours a day of work every single day, but it was an amazing adventure, and
That sounds amazing. Yeah.
yeah, it was. And I feel like some really cool connections were made, both with the horses and the tribe and the kids who found roots that they didn't know they were missing.
So we'll go through a couple of these photos, and I got some questions about this experience.
Sure. So this was one of the young fellows that came into our program, and some of the horses. he was going down some wrong roads, let's say. I don't want to share too many details. But you know, a lot of the kids that came into this program to work with us were at the end of the road. It was like if they didn't turn things around, they were going into the system. You know, we had a lot of drug users, we had violent offenders, we had kids that were getting into all kinds of trouble, and they were kind of given a choice: go into this program and reform and work through this, or, you know, go into the system. So we had several kids a week come through and work with us, and some of them were residential, some actually lived on the property. And we found that the horses were the major conduit for helping these kids get their lives together. We didn't really do a lot of work with the kids. The horses did the work with the kids, and it was incredible.
So that's interesting that you say that. I just interviewed a woman in New York who has an autistic son, and she's using goats to help bridge the gap of like her nonverbal autistic son to have a connection with like living things, and like the progress has been amazing. And so there's what we briefly talked about there is like there is something about working with animals that there it's like maybe it's a mystery, maybe it's not. I don't know. What do you think it is?
I think it's many things. I've done a lot of work with autistic kiddos too in equine programs, and you know, if I don't know if you've read Temple Grandin's work.
The name sounds familiar.
Okay, she's University of Colorado. She teaches humane animal handling, but she is herself autistic. She was told early in life, and her parents were told, that she would never read, she would never probably be verbal, she'd always have severe difficulties. Now she's a professor at Colorado State. So she writes in her books about how a lot of kids, especially kids who are atypical or have learning disabilities or are autistic, think more like animals think than like the rest of us think. She wrote the book Thinking in Pictures, which is a spectacular read, where she talks about how, as an autistic child and as an autistic woman, she tends to have a more nonverbal thinking pattern, where she thinks in images and pictures and almost like archetypes more than she thinks in words, like a lot of us will. We'll have a monologue in our mind, right? But apparently, according to her, she has never had that experience. She thinks in a more kind of visceral and image-based way, archetypal way. And she believes that animals also think and experience the world in a similar way. So that when you take an animal and like an autistic kid and put them together, the child can often relate better to the horse than he can to, you know, the neurotypical people around him. And it makes a lot of sense, because I've seen this. I've seen horses and kids connect, and even kids who are neurotypical but just having difficulty in life. They connect in a way that's really powerful. I think in the case of these Blackfoot kids that we were working with, it was probably the relationship with the horse was probably in a lot of ways one of the more functional relationships in their lives.
Wow.
You know, the horses don't come with judgment. They don't come with manipulation. They don't come with abuse. They approach you very directly, very honestly, and they seek a connection, and it's a really authentic connection that doesn't have strings attached. So I think just that is really potent for kids who maybe have never had that experience. You know, I mean, like that's that would be the ideal human relationship, human to human, right? But most of us don't get to experience that very often. But with the animals, it's a given. So as long as, there's safety and no one's getting hurt, then real connections can be forged with kids and animals that maybe aren't safe to have at home or with their peers.
Hmm. That's very interesting. I guess it makes sense that animals would see in pictures because I haven't seen a horse ever write its name, but like so they just don't have like the language. Like it's a language, it's just different, not how we think about language. So
Right. Yeah. I mean,
okay.
they communicate with body language and energy, right? I mean, it's a little
Yeah, that's true.
might be a
Yep.
little woo to talk about, but um, if you spend any time in a herd of horses or even a herd of goats as prey animals, they're very attuned to their environment and to the intentions of the animals around them, right? If there's something that's going to want to eat them, they're gonna notice that. So they're sensitive. They're nonverbal. They're very tuned into the environment, and they're very present. They're not sitting there worrying about like, well, what am I going to get that promotion next week, or am I going to
Yeah.
die 3 years from now? They're in the moment. They're present, and I think that is also really beneficial to all of us when we relate to them. We can become present and come back to the moment and kind of let go of some of the neuroses that we all kind of have to carry around to get along in life.
Yeah, I don't think it's really that woo. I mean, people that are disconnected will probably think that it's very woo woo, but like the more if like people are like the more you experience it, the more you have to believe that it's true, that there is some sort of like connection. I remember I was working around some cattle one day, some milk cows or whatever, and I was like in like a bad mood for some reason. Not sure why. Early 20s, garbage probably. And like this this one cow or whatever was kind of like the alpha like milk cow, I guess. And she must have sensed that I was just like, oh, just F you. and like picked up her head and her horn got me right beneath the eye. And thankfully there it was tipped. So
Oh.
like it barely broke the skin, but I'm surprised it didn't break my cheekbone, to be honest. So I was like, oh, I better correct my attitude or this thing's gonna kick me right in the chest.
Yep, they will. They know. They're so aware of us, sometimes more than we're aware
Yeah.
of ourselves, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Hmm. So this was on the property, where the on the Blackfoot reservation. And so this would be like East Glacier, Montana, Browning, Montana, if anyone's familiar with the area.
Okay.
And this was just a couple of stud horses having it out, and just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
That's very cool. That's cool to see, especially with like the backdrop and everything. It's great.
Hmm. Um, this was also a couple of stallions, couple of different stallions. We had multiple herds on this property, and we kept them very much like wild horses would organize themselves.
Okay.
It was a very large property. It was about 600 acres, and so we allowed the horses to kind of sort out their pecking orders, choose their mates, set out their family groups the way that they wanted, and create kind of a natural family group system, as wild horses would, which was interesting to watch. I've never had the opportunity to observe wild horses, so it was special to see that, and just I would sit out sometimes for hours and just watch them and how they interacted, and learned a lot about horse psychology and about human psychology, to be honest. Watching them, in a kind of unmanaged situation.
Sure. When horses do this, what does it mean? What are they doing?
So this was two intact male horses, two stud horses. The two family groups had kind of come together. So in horse society, there is one alpha male who runs the herd, and then a bunch of females that connect to him, and then all their babies. So this was two alpha males coming together and kind of squaring off. First thing they always do is sniff each other's noses and share breath, and then from there it usually erupts into a fight. So about 10
like
seconds
what
after
we just saw, they start.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Kicking, biting, trying to figure out who's the head honcho. So yeah, about 10 seconds after I took this photo, this erupted into a screaming, squealing, kicking fight.
Jeez. I was going to say, because this looks like a very nice, peaceful moment, and then you're saying 10 seconds later, it just gets violent.
It did. Like, extremely violent. I think blood was drawn in this, if I remember correctly.
People were like, oh, wow, that's so beautiful. And just wait. Last one here.
So this was just the view from the teepee site where I lived.
But that didn't get old.
No, never. It was a work of art every day.
So you said this is Browning area. You must be looking west, obviously the sun's setting. And so then we're looking towards Glacier National Park, I'm assuming?
Exactly. Yep. That's the Rockies, and that is Glacier.
Cool. Very cool. Well, that about does it for the episode. No, I'm kidding. Wow, that was cool. Now to actually get into the questions that I wrote down. So you grew up in Colorado. When did you actually move to Montana then, and get started where you are now?
So we moved to Montana in the late 90s, fleeing the crowds that were consuming Colorado. And but it took a long time to get where I am now. I had a small homestead in the Big Fork area of the Flathead Valley for about a decade. I bought that place in my early 20s and farmed it for 10, 11 years. And learned a lot. That's kind of when I discovered permaculture practices, started learning and teaching in that sphere a bit, playing with things, seeing what worked. And then I got to a point where I had outgrown that property. So my husband and I met around that time and decided to just jump in both feet to a bigger piece of property. And that's how we landed here.
Nice. That's cool. What I noticed about Colorado is that people that grew up there, they'll retire, Coloradoans, I guess, will retire in Montana. We've got I'm in construction, and we've got clients right now that bought a $1.5 million property near my place that been in Colorado most of their lives, and now they're in their 60s. It needs to be a little quieter. So if anybody in Colorado, you're in Colorado now, you're thinking about Colorado, just skip Colorado, but don't move here. We're full. Montana's full. We only have so many resources. We'd love to have you, but
you're in Montana then?
I am. I'm in the Bitterroot Valley.
Oh, okay. That's gorgeous.
Yeah, it used to be poverty with a view, but now it's just the view and no poverty. So There's pockets of poverty. Let me tell you, there's absolutely pockets of poverty. Um, but anyways, so the place that you're at now, how what was the acreage at your last place, and then what do you have for acreage now and size of your herd and everything?
Yeah, so my first homestead that I bought in my 20s was 2 acres.
Okay.
And I farmed it really intensively, including livestock and everything. Um, and then I moved with my husband to his homestead property, which was 11 acres in the Flathead. And we did that for a couple of years. And then this property that we have now is 120 acres.
Nice. That's a big chunk.
Mm,
So
it is.
so you said you started permaculture in your 2 acre homestead. Um, are you PDC certified?
I am not. That's
Okay.
something I would like to do at some point.
Okay. I was
No,
just
I just
curious, like where you got your training and everything.
lots of reading.
Okay.
And actually, I was lucky enough to work with Ben Falk early on to design my 2 acre property. He lent me
Wow.
a ton of his time and helped me design out that thing, and it was incredible. And of course, now he's a much bigger deal in permaculture. He was pretty young at that point, but he did an amazing job. So
Sure, I bet. A complete side question. Um, so like you selling that property that everything's got a purpose, right? Everything has a place and how it was done and everything. Do when people buy something like that, do they know what they're buying, or they're just like, looks nice and just like don't care?
I did not sell it. I still have it.
Oh, what are you doing
Yeah.
with it? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so a good friend of mine stepped in and took over the place, and I was happy to hand it off. He's maintaining it well,
Good.
and he's covering the mortgage on it, so it's a win-win. And so he's kind of taken the torch. He doesn't farm as intensively as I did, but he definitely loves to garden, and he is reaping the benefits of all the design there.
Oh yeah, because that's the startups, the hard part. The as it grows, it gets easier. So I think he should be paying you more than whatever he's paying you now.
Well, hey, knowing that somebody understands what has gone into that place and is willing to maintain that to me is payment enough.
That's fair. Like, yeah, I don't really like these things, so I'm just gonna start ripping them out. Like, don't you touch those things.
No.
Yeah. You have no idea what it took to get that there. And, if this one's get taken out, all these other ones this guild is just gonna totally collapse. And
That's right. Don't do it.
so yeah, don't do it. You don't touch it. So your current place, what's that look like?
So it's got a lot of good stuff going for it. We bought this from an old rancher who used this as kind of a summer pasture holding space for his cattle periodically. There's no house here. There's nothing here. There wasn't even a well here. So we're building everything from the ground up, and it's been a heck of a lot of work. We've been here 6 months now, but it's coming along, and it's it's got some amazing aspects. So it's got a lot of pasture. It's got a lot of kind of different microclimates around the property, warm spots, cool spots, deep valleys, high plateaus. It has a creek running straight down the middle of it, which is just fantastic. And it has at least one artesian spring on it that's quite productive. We haven't done anything with it. That's like one of those things that you tread extremely carefully before you make any changes. So at this point we just kind of look at it and enjoy that it's there. But at some point I think we'll probably maybe try to design a spring fed pond around that feature, and see how it does. But at this point, it's all about putting in our infrastructure and getting ourselves a house. Where we are living in our fifth wheel camper, so that's had its challenges through a northern Montana winter. But
Sure.
we're hanging in there. We're building our house. We're DIYing basically everything here. We just put our greenhouse up. Um, House is coming along. We're building our house from the ground up. We've got a sawmill. We're cutting our own timbers, making our own lumber. So we've definitely bitten off a large project here, but we're loving every step of it.
That's awesome. Are you so with having a sawmill and everything, are you just doing conventional stick framed house or are you going like some different?
Are you kidding? Conventional stick frame, man? No. Um,
That's why I
so there's
asked. That's why I asked because I figured you wouldn't have done that.
no. So we have created this really insane design. It's never been done before, as far as we know. We have a designer that we've worked with who's an architect and an engineer all in one package with timber frame experience. So what we're doing is a hybrid timber frame and um, it's not quite a net zero home, but it's going to be awfully close. So there's this product called Nexim that comes out of Canada. It's an ICF that doesn't have styrofoam, so insulated
Okay.
concrete form. And what it is it's 55-pound blocks that are about 16 inches thick. They create a 16-inch thick wall. You pour concrete down in them. They're insulated on the outside, but thermal mass on the inside.
Okay.
And they all tie together and create this beautiful monolithic concrete wall. So we're using that as our wall system, and timber frame for all of the traditional framing aspects for the roof and all of that. So it's it hasn't been
This
done
stuff
before.
looks wild. What is it
Did you
made
look
out
up
of?
next?
Yes, I did. What
uh
is this made out of?
so they take wood pulp from like wood sawmill, duff, I guess.
Yeah.
And they have a process, a proprietary process, where they remove the starches and the sugars from the wood, and then they replace that with a mineral complex and mix it all with a Portland cement. So it looks like a big cement block, but it's actually concretized wood pulp. It's kind of like hempcrete, right? If you're familiar with that product. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can cut these things with a circular saw right on the job site. They're really cool to handle. They kind of fit together like big Legos, so it creates a really stable wall. And as you can see, like in that photo, it's got a rock wool insulation toward the outside of the wall. That's that kind of yellowy looking tan stuff. And then where the rebar is sticking up, that's where you pour your concrete. And so it
That's
creates like a
so
honeycomb.
cool.
Aren't they cool? So it creates like this honeycomb of concrete that ties all the blocks together and creates this monolithic concrete structure. These things are incredible. They are fireproof, they're pest proof, they're waterproof. They've taken these blocks and sunk them in a lake for 2 years and then pulled them out and built with them, and they had no structural changes whatsoever after all that water exposure. So they're really cool, and it kind of creates like this castle effect when you build with them. You can kind of see in a couple of these pictures. Um, and then you have this like 16-inch thick wall that just collects all the heat from inside, keeps the elements out. Pretty amazing, and has stopped bullets in tests too, which is kind of a cool feature.
You might need that.
Right.
You might make some enemies on Twitter and they'll be coming for you.
I should probably
That
stop
was
trolling
cool.
people.
We might get to that a little later because I find it really funny. That's so cool. So do you I'm a huge fan of alternative building methods, despite being in construction and being only in like stick frame houses. I did one SIP house
Mm-hmm.
structurally insulated panel. That thing was garbage. That is trash. That is a trash building method. Um, but anyways, so seeing things like this, absolutely cool. This I did not. So when I asked you the question, I had no idea you were doing this. I don't think you've shared this. But that's
Mm-mm.
amazing. Your little nuggets of like what? Um, anyways,
You know,
so when do you
so when we
go ahead?
I was just gonna say when we started this process, we and I have to give a shout out to a couple of accounts on Twitter that are hardcore traditional architecture geeks for kind of turning us in this direction. But when we started this process, trying to figure out how we wanted to build this thing, one of the guiding principles was that we wanted a house that would be there for 500 years, and these fit the bill.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, last question before we move on. When do you so foundation poured about going to be poured this spring?
Nope, it's poured.
Okay. So when do you guys start build using your Legos this spring?
Um, we have started. We've got our walls about 7 feet high.
That's cool. That's amazing. I'm this summer, I might take the family and take a road trip just to see your place because I this is fascinating. It's
Please,
fascinating.
you are welcome. Come on up.
That'd be so cool. Um, so I remember not too long ago you had a tweet about the size of your current herd, something like off the top of my head because I'm a good note taker, like 25 head of cattle, 150
Mhm.
chickens, and something else. Was there
Yeah.
something
Yep.
else?
Yeah, we've got a few pigs and we've got dairy goats and some horses
Okay.
floating around.
Do you want to talk about how all those work together in your system?
Yeah, absolutely. So the cattle are the foundation always in a regenerative ag setting. The
Well, that'll trigger
grazers are
somebody.
good, good. Come at me, bro. Um, so and we have shamelessly ripped off a lot of great techniques from people who are just beyond experienced in this stuff, with more knowledge than I'll ever have. So we have taken a lot of inspiration from Joel Salatin in our cattle and chicken processes. We have our rotational grazing. Um, we definitely rotate harder and do harder impact than I think he does with his cattle. But we're in a very different climate, and we're trying to repair some seriously overgrazed ground. So we're using some methods that he probably does not use because his place is so much further ahead. But the cows are the foundation of that, and then we follow the cows with the chickens. The chickens kind of act as our harrowing team and our property cleanup. They go through and scratch through all the cow pies, keep the fly eggs down, eat all the bugs, and kind of create a nice top layer of fertility there. We also have our geese that help guard the chickens, and guineas, which help with the insects as well. The pigs we use as a giant tilling machine. So we run them anywhere that we want to really disturb the ground. And, like if we want to plant, if we want to seed, if we want to remove the vegetation completely from an area, strip it down so that we can get it ready, cultivated, that's where the pigs come in. And then beyond that, the goats also kind of fulfill the role like the cows do, but they're much harder on the land. So we have to be a little bit careful about how we manage them. They tend to eat more thoroughly than the cows do. They graze down harder, which can be a benefit if you wield it right. But we rotate them as well. So everybody's in portable electric pens. Everybody gets moved frequently. Um, and we just kind of let the land dictate what it needs. We watch very closely, see how quickly the forage is being eaten down. see how quickly the recovery is happening, take good notes, pay attention, take that feedback, observe, observe, observe. That's always the key. And then, act carefully from there.
Specific breed of pig that you use?
They're Mangalitsa's.
That's
They're
becoming very popular. I think between Kuni and Mangalitsa's, you got a 50-50 shot at guessing right.
Yeah, the Kunis are cool. They graze, and I hear they don't root as hard as some other pigs do. The Mangalitsa's they're nice in this climate because they have hair. They have a lot of wool on them, so they don't require as much shelter and as much feed to keep warm. We've been really happy with them, and the pork is just out of this world. It's the best pork I've ever had.
I've heard. I bought one. I don't even remember what the cut is. It doesn't matter. It was amazing for like a Christmas ham type of thing, and it was really, really good. Whatever the glaze I put on it, paired with ham, it was like eating candy. I think I ate it for breakfast like 3 days in a row, and then it was gone. So it was really, really good. So in addition to your livestock, you have horses. You adopted a wild horse from the Bureau of Land Management. Take me through that process. Like, what is that like?
So that's an interesting process. There's a lot of argument happening right now about the BLM's methods of managing the wild horses. Basically, they manage them as a feral species. So they have almost carte blanche to remove them. There are people that will argue, and I tend to be more in this camp, that horses are native to North America. We know they are. They evolved here. They originated here. They very possibly never disappeared from here. So that's the crux of the issue there. The BLM claims that the horses, although they originated in North America, they did disappear. They went extinct, and then they were reintroduced by the Spaniards, which is what enables them to manage them as a feral species. There's some good evidence that they never really disappeared here. There have been some findings up in Canada in the permafrost of horses that are quite a bit more recent than the date of their supposed extinction. So this is a bit of a legal tangle that's starting to come out. It's very possible that the BLM will end up at some point having to manage them as a native species, just like they do deer and elk, which is a whole new can of worms. But for now, they round them up. They use helicopters to round up whole herds of horses off the prairie. They run them into pens. They castrate them, vaccinate them, deworm them, brand them, and bring them into civilization and attempt to adopt them out. They do their best. They can't adopt all of them out. There are thousands upon thousands of horses standing in government holding pens right now being fed on the taxpayer dollar, which, is also a can of worms. But they do try to adopt as many as possible, and that's where this guy that we have came from. He was actually a BLM reject. He was considered unadoptable because he showed aggression towards some government employees, and I have to say I'm with him there.
I was gonna be like, you got the right horse. I don't know what the problem is. I think you got the perfect horse.
I agree. Like, we have the same philosophy, dude. You want to come home?
Is his name Waco or something?
His name is Cortez.
Oh, okay.
But so he was sent to a secondary kind of reform program for troubled horses.
That sounds ridiculous.
I know. So there are these
like
these
Joe
people
Biden's dog.
Yeah, exactly. there there are these people who volunteer. They're called tip trainers, TIP, and they take the troubled horses from the BLM and try to work with them, train them, reform them, and make them more adoptable. So he went through that process and came out the other side doing really well. He's never shown any sign of aggression toward me because I'm not a government employee. So um, and now he's home and he's doing really well. We work together a lot, and I think he's going to be a fantastic horse. He's smart as the whip. He's incredible. So I'm excited to see how he turns out.
Nice, very cool. Why do we need to get rid of wild horses? Do we need to get rid of wild horses? Are they a problem?
Some would say they are.
What do you think?
Well, I think they're a problem for people who are leasing BLM land for grazing. They are competing with the cattle and the sheep that are out on BLM land. There are cattlemen who think that the horses shouldn't be there. They're quite a powerful lobby. They put a lot of money into...
Imagine that.
Right. They put a lot of money into getting the horses removed. They don't want the competition. Right now, the BLM has some kind of what I think are crazy requirements or restrictions, we should say, around the horses and the number of horses that are allowed to be out there. It's something like one horse for every 5,000 acres. I mean, don't quote me on that, but it's really minimal. They've worked really hard on removing the horses. They bring them in through the roundups, which are quite violent. They often lose horses. Horses die in that process. And then they also have a contraception program. They bring the horses in, they inject them with birth control drugs that last several years, implants, and then they cut them loose. So it is very much a concerted effort to remove them.
That sounds so ridiculous.
That's your tax dollars.
That's the solution.
Yep.
Oh, whatever. Whatever.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's like a whole political thing. There are people on both sides of that debate that are quite passionate about it. So for better or worse.
I guess it's just best to be stuck in the middle and just be like, just laugh. There's like, what are you gonna do? Okay, so
right.
You might have mentioned this. I didn't think we were going to be talking about your wild horse for so long, but I didn't realize this is like a can of worms for me. This is like a whole world. I had no idea. Why did you adopt this horse?
I don't know, actually.
Okay.
So I had some connections to the tip trainer that was taking these horses that are, needing to be reformed. And she shares pictures of them and their progress and how they're doing under her care. And
Okay.
his pictures popped up and I don't know what it was. It was like this gut heart sudden connection. Like, oh, I have to meet this horse. I don't know what it came from. I was not looking for a horse at the time at all. I have two others that are, totally sufficient for what I need. But there's something about him. So I went and met him, completely fell in love, and decided to bring him home. Went through the adoption process, which is a bit of an ordeal with the BLM. And they approved me, and I brought him home, and I've been very happy with the decision.
Good. I'm surprised. So is it expensive?
It's $125 to adopt a horse.
Okay, that's not bad.
Mm-mm.
Because they were even playing like radio ads down here, like, hey, come get I don't know what they call a wild like a BLM horse. I forgot what they call it, but they're like, come get it plus $1,000 to take care of it. And I was like, I don't know. Can you get it and turn it? I know it's like turn it into dog food. I don't know. Like down here in the Bitterroot, someone could do that. I don't know.
That does happen.
Oh,
Unfortunately,
geez.
yeah. There have been many cases where people were getting truckloads of these horses, shipping them to Mexico or to Canada for slaughter. It's
Truckloads.
truckloads, yeah. And in fact, years ago, I had a bit of a tangle with Conrad Burns, who was our elected representative here in Montana. He
That sounds just like a bad name. Like this guy's
yeah,
trouble.
he was trouble.
Onrad.
He was on the appropriations committee. I think it was agriculture. Um, and he slipped this little rider into a funding bill, which was really sneaky. Nobody saw it, to basically allow the slaughter of wild horses in this country for human consumption. And he didn't, there was no
Hmm.
debate, there was no vote, there was no none of that. Nobody knew about this until it was through on this bill. And it created this massive firestorm of argument in politics and protests, and it was several years of fighting to get that removed, and a lot of people involved.
Wow. So it's gone. It's gone. It's done.
It's gone. Horse slaughter is now illegal in this country, and that was the beginning of that fight.
Huh. My follow-up question was like, how long for like empty shelves until people just like start eating their horses, especially the ones that are like lawn ornaments that nobody actually uses or rides.
Well, if Venezuela is any indication, it's not long.
Before the end of the year or maybe next year. What's your 2022 bingo card look like? Eating horses?
I wouldn't be surprised. I did not have the uprising of Canada on my bingo card, so I'm going to withhold judgment.
That's true. Just like we're almost into month 3 and we got to start over. Just clear the board. I want a new one. I want a new card.
Yeah.
So you're big into livestock
Mm-hmm.
and it all integrates together. So you talked about your greenhouse.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to tell me more about that?
Sure, yeah. We just finished building our 120-foot long greenhouse. It's a high tunnel. It
Oh, I
was
did
quite
see
a job.
pictures of that.
Yep.
That's
And
crazy.
that is it's going to be an integral part of our food production here. Obviously, I mean that's a lot of space to create food. We've ended up in kind of an interesting situation here in this community. We're in a food desert. And you wouldn't expect that in like northern Montana. You would think people would be pretty self-sufficient, but up here there's not a whole lot of fresh food. There are a lot of ranches, but they're all in the commodity system. So they ship their cattle to feedlot and they don't direct market. So up here, there's really not a lot of local food available, and we realized this very quickly when we got here. And our community made a huge point to accost us at every opportunity and make sure that we were going to be creating food here. It was like, oh,
Oh,
you have cows,
oh,
you have
okay.
pigs, you have greenhouse, like you're going to be feeding us, right? So we've scaled much faster than we expected here, and
Okay.
I think that's going
Good.
to continue. So we came into this kind of looking at it like, well, we're going to build this house and we're going to build our farm, and it's going to be a bit of a process. We're not going to get a whole lot done, and we're not going to try to market for a while. um, Before we even had a house, like we're living in a camper and people were showing up at our door to buy milk and eggs and demanding it. It's like, we need food, and you guys are doing some stuff here and we want to be involved. And we actually had at one point like 15 neighbors packed into our camper holding this community meeting going, hey, what are you guys going to be growing? What can we count on? So
I love that. That's amazing.
so we're crazy enough to be building a house and a farm at the same time, and trying to feed the community. And so far, we're doing a decent job, I think, with the milk and the eggs at least. And this year the produce will come online with this greenhouse. So it's been a bit of a project, but well worth doing.
That's awesome. I did not expect that answer when you said that they accosted you. I was like, given the surrounding area be like, get out of here, or like, I'm gonna smash your tomatoes or something. I don't know. Like that's I mean, that's cool. Was that intentional when you moved there? Like, did you know, like, this is a food desert and I'm gonna capitalize on that?
Um, we had noticed going to the grocery store that there was a lack of good produce. We didn't know coming into it that there were so few farms here marketing to the public, though. Um, that was a surprise, to be honest. I thought
Hmm.
we were going to come into this vibrant little community where a lot of people had, gardens and farms and meat and things like that, and it just was not that way. I was kind of shocked. So it's a it's a little bit of pressure, to be honest. Coming into a community like this where people are kind of looking at us like, "Hey, you're our hedge. Things are getting weird. Are you going to be able to feed us?" It's like, man, this is we've got it's going to take some time to be
Yeah,
able to do that, and we're not going to feed the whole community. So, big part of what I'm doing at this point is trying to help people set up their homesteads here, and encouraging people to set up gardens and greenhouses, and anything I can do to support you. I'll happily show up and help you learn, and but we can't do this ourselves, so y'all need to have some food autonomy too, and sovereignty here. So that's also becoming part of our life here that I didn't really anticipate.
that's
But
amazing though. That's really great. That I mean, that's a great way to like get to know your neighbors. Like, I like that. Like, I like that guy. He's pretty nice. This guy's kind of a dick, though. I'm still gonna help him with his garden because I don't want dicks knocking on my door asking for whatever, like for me to feed them.
right.
Like, I mean, the, like we need more decentralization in our food system, and like you moving to that area and producing food, like you're the centralization point. But now you're trying to like, okay, you all need to grow your own thing, put it on us. You can grow a tomato, like, or whatever it is you eat, like it'll be fine. Like, just so that's awesome. That's awesome that you're doing that. I didn't know you're doing that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we're actually thinking now that we need to formalize it a little bit and create some workshops and some classes moving forward. We are also building a farm store on our property. That's a big part of our build here.
Cool.
So I'm trying to get the word out that along with that farm store comes an opportunity for our neighbors to market some of their goods and maybe get a little bit more income independent as well, and create a little side income for themselves. The outpouring of support for the farm store has been just incredible from this community. So people want it, they just didn't know how to organize it, and they didn't know how to get started. And there's a lot of young people flooding into this community, and a lot of them are urban refugees and suburban refugees from cities. So they know that the system is destabilizing. They know that it's not dependable. They know that it's probably going to get worse. Um, but they don't know what to do about it except run to the countryside, right? But that's
Yeah.
the first step. That's not You can run to the countryside and still starve, just like you can in a city. So there's this huge learning curve, and I think helping people through that learning curve is going to end up being an integral part of what we're trying to do here, beyond just directly feeding people. Because, like I said, we can only feed so many with our own labor. But if we can decentralize, like you're saying, and convince people that this is worth doing and that it's not that difficult, and you can learn these skills, you get your hands on the dirt, and you can make food come out of the dirt with just a little bit of effort and a little bit of knowledge, then we might be, in a much better position in the next few years to ride out like whatever's coming, which, it could be inflation, could be, who knows.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just at a farm store this morning, and they open at 9. I got there a little bit after 10. They um, had already ran out of raw milk, but like had just gotten some. sometime between whenever they ran out and whenever I showed up. So it's like, I'll take a gallon and a half. Like, that's, yeah, cool. Like, I guess it's lucky that I showed up when I did, because I was like, I hope they don't run out. And they did, but they got more. So it just goes to show you like how popular that type of thing is. Like, I'm sure we're way of like the population here is more dense where I'm at than where you are. So there's something to be said for that. But so yeah,
Yeah,
it's cool.
and I think a lot of this is somewhat new as well. I've been homesteading for the better part of a decade and a half now. And 5-8 years ago, there was not this kind of demand that we're seeing now. I sold goat milk, black market. I sold goat milk
Yes.
for a lot of years and produce.
Is there any other way?
Right. Well, now it's legal. That's good. It took Montana a while, but
Sure.
we can do it now. But I always kind of had to market things. I had to put effort into marketing. And now it's not like that. I think there's been a sea change in the way people are experiencing the world. I think COVID and the lockdowns and the supply chain issues are of course driving that. But it's been really interesting to see how people's psychology has changed around food production and food buying. I didn't expect that it would be such a rapid change in buying habits like I've seen. It's been very, very rapid from, hey, that's great that you have milk and produce, but it's cheaper at the store, and it's I can go to the farmer's market and that's fine, to, oh my goodness, I need to know local producers. Like, I want to have this relationship now because I don't trust the
Mm-hmm.
grocery store anymore. So that's been interesting.
Absolutely. Um, what do you said you had 150 laying hens, right?
Yeah.
What do you sell a dozen eggs for up there?
$5 a dozen.
Okay. Okay. Um, I got a buddy down here who's got like 350, 450, somewhere in there. It's a lot. And he goes for $6 a dozen down here. And he will sell to restaurants for a little bit of a better price, maybe 550 for a dozen, depending. I don't know.
Yeah.
But so yeah, he sells a lot of eggs. Um so I guess we kind of already talked about the implementing live wheel of death thing. Okay, there we go. Um, so what are you trying to what does your plan look like with your animals and your um in your grazing pasture and maybe your garden? Um, are you going to bring in like chickens into like your garden or your high tunnel and to like, kind of prep the garden area that way at all?
Yeah, we've played with that idea, for sure. This winter we thought we would put the chickens in the high tunnel, but they did so well in their portable coop that we didn't feel the need to.
Okay.
And right now we have our meat rabbits in the high tunnel. They're doing really well in there, and we have some quail. So once we have vegetables growing in there, I wouldn't put chickens in because chickens are damaging. Um, but the quail are kind of filling that niche, so they will
Cool.
take the bugs right off the plants. They produce a lot of eggs. They're good to eat. So they might end up just being the birds that live in there. We don't know. We're gonna have to play with that a little bit. Of course, if we had a really harsh winter, like 30 below, the chickens would probably need to go into the high tunnel. Um, so far, that hasn't been the case. So, at this point, our plan is to experiment. I see this property as a giant laboratory. This is a climate I haven't worked with before. This is a piece of property I haven't worked with before. The soil is very different than what I'm used to. The rainfall, the seasons are longer here, so that's kind of cool. So it's just going to take a lot of experimentation and seeing what works and playing with it. But already in 6 months, we started pretty late in the season. We brought our cattle here in like September, and they immediately improved the land with just like 1 or 2 cycles of rotational grazing before the grass went dormant. We were seeing better growth. We were seeing greener pasture. So I'm really excited to see what happens this coming year and to just keep working with it. I mean, that's always the key, right? Is to make small changes, observe, see what happens. I mean, things, you start changing things in an ecosystem, you're going to have second and third order effects that maybe you don't anticipate. So for me, it's always about, making changes slowly and working with all these moving parts and seeing what works and what doesn't, because what works here isn't going to work for somebody 5 miles down the road and vice versa.
Sure.
So we really just have to play with it and see how things go.
Very nice. Question about the high tunnel. Was there a grant program for the high tunnel that you got in on, or because I've heard about that you can get, it's like NRCS or something like that, does grants for high tunnels?
I just heard about that program for the first time today from one of my customers.
No.
So no is the short answer.
I bet that made you mad.
A little bit. Although I think they have like an $8,000 limit on that grant, and ours was a bit more expensive than that. So it wouldn't have been a whole lot of help anyway.
Sure. I did hear like sometimes they pay like half or a third or something. It depends on the thing, and it might not even be the one you want, the one that they make you get or something. I don't know how the program works.
Well, maybe we'll put up a second one. And
there you go. Yeah, just inside the one you already built.
That's right. Double microclimate might work.
Yeah. So sounds like you're helping others get prepared by helping them grow their own food. That's a pretty good start. I mean, that's a big start for a lot of people. But how else are you helping other people get prepared?
Screaming from the rooftops that they need to get prepared is a big part of it. I think a lot of people have kind of a gut feeling that things are not as they used to be and they need to do something about it. But there are still a lot of people that I think are deeply dependent and don't see a way out of that or don't see a reason to get out of that. So I have a lot of conversations with people like, hey, are you aware that we're seeing a fertilizer shortage this coming year that's really going to impact agriculture? Are you aware that we're seeing like record inflation that is going to make it difficult to buy food? So your food dollar is not going to stretch as far. We've got the bird flu issue getting ready to hit, and that's something that local poultry producers are already really concerned about. So there are all these things kind of stacking up that maybe people who are outside of the farm and ranch sphere aren't as aware of. So having those conversations is a big part of it, and then providing the positive aspect of, hey, okay, this is what's potentially coming down the pipe, but that doesn't mean that it's all doom and gloom. You can be optimistic. This is the doomer optimism thing.
Okay, yeah.
And you can take steps now that are going to make this a lot smoother for your family to ride through. And it can be as simple as some tomatoes on the patio in containers, or a few chickens in the backyard. Start small, don't get in over your head. And also develop relationships with local producers, right? That's a big part of this. Is like we're just one farm, but there are farms everywhere. I mean, this is Montana. There's farms and ranches all over the state. A lot of amazing people doing really amazing work and producing a ton of food, and you need to support them so that they can continue to produce food and grow and scale their operations. And it's going to make it a lot easier for all of us to ride out whatever comes down the line. And even if nothing happens, even if things carry on as they always have, and you can go to the grocery store and get everything you need there, this is worth doing because the food quality is better. You're going to have better health over time. You're going to be more connected with your food. You're going to learn better cooking skills. You're going to have better flavors in your kitchen. There are all these reasons. So I kind of try to have conversations with people on their level and approach it from whatever angle they're most comfortable with, whether it's just culinary delights or, oh my goodness, the ship is burning and you need to do something about it. There's a lot of room in between in between those two extremes to have these conversations. So, and that kickstarts the education process. And then people go, okay, well, what do I need to do? Okay, that's an important question. Now we can start looking for answers and exploring what's going to work for you in your situation.
Sure. I mean, when you talk to people like that, you have to have a lot of restraint because like you can't scare them off because then they'll just like, never mind. I'm just going to do whatever I was doing and hope it keeps working. Like grocery store, Costco, Sam's Club, Walmart, all that. I got to have my, like, put it all on my Target red card. Like I'm just going to keep hoping that works. Cause, so they talk about, I think a really easy one is food to start with, storing food. And then, the gardening, like plant a couple tomatoes, have some chickens or whatever. Like that's easy. But like where you could really scare people off, it's like, what if your well stopped working? What would you do?
Mm-hmm.
What if you couldn't get gas? What would you do? What if they cut off power to your house or just lost power or whatever? What would you do? Like, do you have a generator? Like, it's very like you could go down that rabbit hole hard and they'll be like, never mind. Like, plug your ears. Like, I don't want to hear it. Like,
yeah.
But,
No, nobody wants to face the idea that they could end up having to live an Amish life. People aren't ready.
It's starting to look better, though, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, for me, yeah, absolutely. But I'm not as tied in as some might be. So
yeah, yep, absolutely. Is Bitcoin part of your preparedness?
Oh yes, yeah.
Are you a maximalist?
No, I'm a land maximalist.
What?
A land maximalist.
What does that mean?
Well, we hold Bitcoin, but it's not our primary investment. Our primary investment is land, tools, tangibles.
I get it.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, is that like a crypto thing that I've never heard of?
No.
Yeah, maybe you could just start a coin. We'll do a new ICO or whatever, and just the ticker is LAND and somehow NFT something, blah, blah, blah. I don't know.
It sounds like a shit coin to me.
That's why it has to have value. Like it needs to be non-fungible.
That's right. We hold some good old traditional Bitcoin, and otherwise we're sinking resources into land, livestock, tools. We just brought home a sawmill. Things that we can continue to produce value with if whatever happens. I think Bitcoin is wonderful. I think it's going to be an exceptionally powerful tool for sovereignty and for the decentralized revolution that we're looking at trying to drive here. But I don't think it's everything. And, I think there are a lot of people that look at Bitcoin as the end all be all and the final solution that they need for the financial system. And yeah, I mean, it is a good store of value potentially, and a tool for exchange. And I love everything about its story, its background, and its future. But I don't think that we should be just stacking sats at the expense of the real things, because you can't eat a Bitcoin. Bitcoin can potentially provide you food, but right now, you actually need food, and you need tools, and you need space, and those are things that I think are very, very worth investing in as well.
I think a couple things. One, that no, you can't eat a Bitcoin, but you can't eat a sawmill either.
That's true.
I think cash, like the US dollar being a soft asset, people don't have, like, they don't think of anywhere else to put a soft asset like cash into anything other than Bitcoin being a hard asset. So, like, for you to be able, like, you diversify in putting in some into like Bitcoin and then some into like a sawmill. The sawmill itself doesn't do anything unless you have lumber, but you can produce lumber, which is a hard asset. Like, people are gonna need it. And so, like, that makes a lot of sense to me, to be able to spread it out that way into tools and land and being able to produce food. Like, if you had like infrastructure, to be able to raise more chickens or goats or pigs or literally whatever, bees. So yeah, it's interesting. So what do you think about these people that are like get on zero, like zero fiat?
Um, well, I think we're all going to end up having to do that sooner or later. At this point, fiat has its place. I don't love that that's the fact, but it is. There are a lot of places that you need to transact that don't accept crypto. And that's, everywhere from your grocery store to your neighbor who's selling tomatoes. And I mean, those are great places to have the conversation about Bitcoin and to get people on board. But right now, we do still have need for fiat and for the US dollar. So we kind of have to work with what we have. And I think it would be best to um, create a slower transition if we can into a decentralized currency, rather than trying to take this sudden leap and destabilizing everything. I know there are some people who advocate for just rip it off like a band-aid and deal with what comes. um, but not everybody's in a position to go through that in a graceful way. So I mean, I have fiat currency. I have a bank account. I use it every day. But I try to use it in a way that is going to increase my stability over time and not increase my dependence on it. So I think that's a key point that needs to be made. And people um probably realistically are going to need it. They're going to need the US dollar for a while. But I think we can move through it. And I think we've had some recent events that are showing people the power of Bitcoin, like with the truckers in Canada. They're freezing accounts, they're freezing people's bank accounts, they're taking their fiat currency right out from under them.
Yeah.
But there are guys like popping into truckers' windows with manila envelopes with $8,000 worth of Bitcoin and saying,
Whoa,
"Here, dude."
really? I did not hear that.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah. I just saw a video the other day. Some truckers doing a live stream, and this guy pops in his window and hands him this envelope, and he's like, "Hey, man, thanks for what you're doing. Here's 8K in Bitcoin. This is so you can keep doing what you're doing and resisting." And this, it had instructions in there on how to marshal the Bitcoin and step by step and keep it off of uh, keep it out of the system, keep it off of exchanges, of course. And that's the other thing, man. Get your coins off the exchange if they're there, because
Absolutely.
we just found out that they're not yours if they're
Oh
there.
yeah.
So
I heard, first off, that guy handing out envelopes, that is a hardcore orange pilling somebody. I mean, that's amazing. I've never
mhm,
heard of that before. That's cool. And
yeah,
I I always have been trying to get any of my crypto off of exchanges as fast as possible.
yeah,
I heard that Coinbase, like, for all the money that's being exchanged, or crypto that's being bought by like billionaires and all this stuff, all these traders, that they might not actually have these Bitcoins, that it would almost be like fractional reserve banking of Bitcoin through Coinbase, if that makes sense to people that know what it is we're talking about. Like, so get your money off of these exchanges before it's too late. And we do find out that Coinbase is kind of like a huge grift. Like,
Yeah, like what if we ever run on Coinbase and we find out that there's not enough coins to go around? What do we do
right,
then?
exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Um, so as part of preparedness, what's the difference between self-reliance and self-sufficiency?
Hmm. I guess it depends on who you ask.
I'm
Um,
asking you.
so to me, self-sufficiency is not possible. I actually wrote a piece on this some years ago called "The Myth of
Okay.
Self-Sufficiency," and I explored this idea that a lot of people who are new to the homesteading sphere come into this with the idea that, I'm going to go live on the land like a rugged individualist out in the Alaskan wilderness, and I'm going to provide everything I need for myself, and I don't need nobody. That, you know, might work for some extraordinarily skilled people who have all the time in the world and don't really need other humans. But for the average human, that's not the goal here. Um, if we're talking self-sufficiency, we really can't be completely self-sufficient. We're always going to need something that somebody else makes or produces or provides, or
Sure.
services. We can't do everything, we can't know everything, we can't produce everything. There's just not enough hours in the day. I really don't like the term self-sufficiency for that reason. Self-reliance, though, I can rely on myself, and most of what I need I can produce, and what I can't, I can cover, is more attractive. It's the image that I have is more one, like interdependence, right? I have a
Sure.
neighbor who welds, and I can make leather things, and we can trade, or I can trade my goat milk for some honey or whatever, right? So the interdependence of a community, of self-reliant individuals, I think, is kind of what we need to aim at, more than this kind of deep prepper mentality of self-sufficiency at all costs and not needing anybody else. I don't think that's realistic.
I mean, look at that picture um, of your parents when they were trappers, right? I mean, heavily self-reliant to like the nth degree,
Mm-hmm.
but they couldn't be self-sufficient. You said they still had to go into town every now and then to get supplies or whatever it is. So like that's like the perfect example of what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're not growing coffee beans on the top of a mountain in the winter in Colorado, right? So there are always things you need or you want, and that's fine. That doesn't mean that you're failing at the homesteading dream. I think it's a realistic outlook.
Absolutely. So switching gears a little bit here. Who did you piss off on Twitter today? Anybody? Any today specifically? It
Well,
seems like every day.
I knew this interview was coming, so I behaved really well today.
Why?
Um,
I want to talk about drama. I want to.
I don't know. Did you hear about that guy who stole his wife from some other guy?
No,
Oh, that
I
was
missed
like
that one.
that was a big drama today. Yeah, some masculinity influencer apparently wrote this thread about how he stole his wife from some other man she was engaged to, and he got just dragged through the mud. It was kind of glorious because his story was quite awful, to be honest. Um, I thought about jumping into that one, but I thought, yeah, I'm gonna sit this one out and just laugh from the sidelines.
Sure. The one I'm thinking about specifically is I think it was just earlier this week. You got blocked by a soy boy.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that was
That was
fun.
funny. That was funny.
Yeah, he was um, I think he was a vegan guy, plant-based guy who jumped into a thread where I commented about food, of course, because that's usually what I'm talking about. and he got quite upset about my perspective on these things. And um, he followed me through, from that thread to my own comments and my posts, and kind of created this little drama. It was interesting. And at one point, after a lot of back and forth, he goes, "Well, we can agree on Bitcoin and something else. I don't remember what. So I guess we can be friends." And then he blocked me.
Okay, that's what friends do.
Yeah.
Like I like how he was like declaring these are the terms, and then out. Yeah.
Oh, people on the internet are interesting sometimes.
You post a lot on Twitter about needing strong men. What do you mean by that?
Well, we do. I very unironically called myself an anti-feminist for a while on Twitter. I removed that, but it still stands. I see that we've had a damaged relationship between men and women, and that's been going on a long time. I think it started with probably with the women's suffrage movement, maybe even before that, but it really took on steam with the sexual revolution of the 60s. And all of this, well, I don't need no man, I'm a strong independent woman. Women need men like fish need bicycles. That was a popular t-shirt in the 60s. And I think that it's time for our social immune system to kick in a little bit and realize that is not a healthy outlook. It's damaged relationships and family systems deeply. In the work I've done over the years doing, equine assisted therapy and counseling for people, relationship counseling, family counseling, I've seen this firsthand. I've seen broken family after broken family, and a lot of it I've identified as coming from this primary relationship being damaged. Women need men, and we've been told that that's not the case. We've been told that we shouldn't say that or think that, and I think that's kind of an illness, because it's a basic biological fact. I mean, we are not the same. We each have different roles and skills that we fulfill. Kids, I mean, the data is very clear. It is final that kids do better in two-parent households with a mother and a father present. And I feel like that should not be something that is up for argument, but it seems to be these days, and that bothers me. I think that this is something we need to fix on the cultural level, and maybe I can do a little part by knocking some heads and arguing with some feminists and changing that, and telling men that you are needed, you are appreciated, you are capable of things that we are not, as much as women like to sometimes pretend that we can do everything a man can do and do it better. It's not true. So I think that this is part of the grand cultural narrative that needs to shift, and the sooner it shifts, the better off we'll be, because I think we're moving into some times where having a strong man in one's home and one's life is going to absolutely potentially make or break the success of a household and a family system. So we've skated for a while on government support stepping into that role, and it's allowed a lot of women to make choices that they maybe otherwise wouldn't make if they didn't have that support in place. So we really need to examine this, I think, and create a different narrative, and one that celebrates the roles of the genders and the need for both people to show up as whole humans in that relationship and provide what we are designed to provide to the family system, and not at the expense of the other, and not as a strong independent individual in this system, because it's not working. It's just not working.
Do you think that's intentional? Like the castration of men in our society? Is that like by design, do you think?
I think it is. I don't necessarily think that there was some, secret meeting in a dark room where a bunch of social engineers decided, hey, we need to eliminate men
It was
from.
probably on Zoom.
It was probably on Zoom. George Soros was definitely there. Um,
Absolutely. And Klaus Schwab and
Klaus Schwab.
Bill Gates.
Yeah, yeah. No, I do think it's intentional. I think, well, there's probably multiple aspects of this, and this is a whole other conversation. But convincing women that being in the home is uh, basically slavery, and they're not supposed to feel satisfied with that, and that the only place to be really satisfied and fulfilled and whole as a human is in a boardroom somewhere. um, that, I mean, the immediate effect of that was creating a whole 50% of the population suddenly becoming taxpayers. It created a new tax paying base. So even if we don't go beyond that, that's significant. I mean, that significantly increased the power of the government because of the influx of money. And then, of course, the after effects of that were that it depressed wages. So now, with women in the workforce, men don't make as much money as they used to. So now the single earner household is much more difficult to achieve. So both parents have to be gone. Now the kids are in school being raised by the government. And, when the kids are being raised by the government, then they are susceptible to the programming that keeps this whole thing going. So, I do think it was intentional, maybe not as a well thought out plan, but definitely as a way to sway the population into giving up a lot of autonomy and sovereignty that we used to have in favor of, the state taking the central place in the household. And that's been extremely damaging to our families and homes.
Absolutely. It almost seems like whatever the mainstream's doing, like mainstream society, you got to go the other way. Like, obviously, not like, don't take that like to the absolute, like, people aren't eating rocks. I should start eating rocks. But like, a lot of people are putting their kid in government school. Got to homeschool or whatever other option. Like, like, just don't do that. People are going to the grocery store. I better grow my own food. Like, just gotta like. Do you remember that movie? Maybe you never seen it. Lucky Number 11.
I didn't see it.
There's a move called the Kansas City Shuffle. If everyone's looking right, you go left. If everyone's going left, you go right. Like, so it's just like, you gotta swim upstream sometimes. Like, it's tough. My wife does stay home with our son, and somehow when she went back to work at like 3 months after our son was born, her her boss was just awful to her. Just like, it was like something happened. I don't even know what it was, but her boss was just terrible. And so she'd come home just like upset all the time. And she's like, I crunched the numbers. We can afford for me to stay home. And I'm like, if you say so, let's do it. Like, this is, yeah, absolutely. Let's do this. And so so far, a year and a half later, we're still making it work. So
That's good. I bet the whole family system has benefited from that decision.
absolutely. I don't like leaving. I don't like leaving the house because, like, he'll be standing at the door waving by, and it's like, oh, damn it. I'll just throw my keys in the ditch and just stay home.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, we've been very lucky to be able to make that work. So, because I'm sure a lot of people would like to have it this way and just either can't figure it out, don't want to figure it out, or, I mean, it's honestly, to get a little personal here, if my wife was like career driven, like she was like working in coffee shops or whatever, like that's her thing. She was a store manager and then started opening up stores for a chain and whatnot. And they were like having her travel around the country, opening up coffee shops or whatever. And like, that was her thing. And then I ruined that by moving us to Montana. So, and then she was trying to get her foothold in here. And her last job was at the airport in Missoula, and it just like, it all fell apart. So like for her, if she was more career driven and like wanted whatever she wanted to do, like I want this, I'd say go for it. Like if that's what you want to do, I'll be a stay-at-home dad. I don't care. Like that's just us personally, but that's not how it worked out. So we're the conventional mom stays at home, dad goes to work, instead of mom and dad go to work and you get raised by an almost stranger.
Mm-hmm. I'm really glad you were able to figure out a way to make that happen. And I think most people, if they were willing to make some changes, could figure out how to make that work in their lives. It would require some downsizing, but I think it's worth it.
Oh, you mean living below your means? Oh, yeah. Like a peasant?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, hey, very cool. We've been going for almost 2 hours now. Do you want to wrap up on anything before we do plugs?
No, I mean, this has been a wonderful conversation. I'm really glad to have been invited on. I appreciate your time, and
I appreciate yours.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
This has been a lot of fun. You can find Lauren on Twitter at Lauren in the Wild. Her handle is Bull Respecter. What did that come from, by the way? What does that mean? Is it pretty self-explanatory?
It is. We bought our first bull and had a lot of conversations in our house about what that means. And a big part of that is not forgetting to respect that animal could kill you if he decided to, and that bulls are dangerous even when they seem very placid. So somewhere in that conversation, I said, man, I'm a lifetime bull respecter because I have been chased by them. I have been terrified by them. I've had to jump over fences to get away from them. So it stuck.
Understood. You said you're working on a website. So that is, are you trying to like hook up your farm store through the website, I'm assuming?
Yeah. So our website's actually going to start out as a digital farm store. Until we have a physical location built, which is going to come a little bit later. That will serve as like our online ordering system for our neighbors and our community. So they'll be able to log on, see what we have in stock, put their orders in. Yeah. And that'll be our app.
Well, great. For everyone else, you can follow Farm Hop Life almost everywhere. We'll try to make it hard to not stay in touch with you. So great. Thanks for being on, Lauren. I appreciate it.
Thank you.